Well, hey there, you sweet smelling ray of sunshine. Do you own a Leica? If you do, I'm happy for you, and I'm jealous like it's my job. I want one, and I don't know that I have a great reason to want one outside of a general feeling of lust. I've not used one personally, and my only real brush with the red dot was marveling at a used R6.2 in a used camera shop in Asheville, North Carolina last week. But this video is about the Canon 5D, you say. Why is he prattling on about Leica? It's a fair question, and it's because in the absence of a Leica, I wanted to have a photographic experience that got as close as I could get to the Leica experience with the gear I already own. I thought to myself, what would it be like if you had a Leica Q right now? What if you had just one focal length for a trip that would include pictures of landscapes, street shots, various interesting objects, and on occasion, my father? I started with the idea that I would take my Sony a7 III and a bit of legacy glass, probably the 28mm Minolta f2.8, and I think that would have been fun. The pics likely would have been solid, but the Sony in some ways is an embarrassment of riches. It's so good in terms of ISO performance, focus assist, and dynamic range that I wondered if I would lose some of the challenge associated with limitation, and consequently, the satisfaction associated with overcoming those challenges. So instead I grabbed my old Canon 5D Classic and the STM 40mm pancake lens. Yo, I hear ya. That's not 28mm like a Leica Q, and you're right, it's not. But it's what I had, so I decided to go with it. Oh my gosh. And where did I go with it? Over the course of 8 days, my pops and I visited Southwest Virginia, Western North Carolina, Savannah, Georgia, Myrtle Beach, and Chattanooga, Tennessee. We rented a car for the joys of flexibility. Functionally, this meant we traded time spent traveling for the option to use bathrooms at our leisure. Okay then, the Canon 5D Classic and a 40mm lens. I left it in manual mode and most of the time on ISO 400, more on that later. It was a simple setup really. I operated the aperture with the thumb wheel and the shutter speed with the dial by the shutter button. The big convenience I allowed myself was autofocus. If you've watched my other reviews, you know I haven't had great luck with manual focus glass on this body. Okay, that's that, boom, done. And now on to the pics. Normally I spew these as liberally as my baby sister spewed Similac, but this time I decided to pick my top few and spend a little more time breaking down how each of them is representative of the 5D Classic. What I like, what I don't, and what about the image demonstrates the character of the rig. So here goes. Pick one. This one is from a wildlife refuge north of Savannah, maybe Hardyville, South Carolina. This isn't the sort of place you want to leave your vehicle unless you have designs on being a tasty treat for an alligator. Croc? Alligator? Nurse? In any case, my pops piloted the Ford Fiesta and I folded into the back and shot this as well as I could through the child safety window. The colors are what I like, and that's very representative of this camera and lens combo. Great saturation. And I guess one could make an argument that there's at least an attempt to compose, with foreground interest, midground of the reflective water, and some interest in the sky. What you can't see here are the number of small corrections I had to make for dust on the sensor. There's my dislike. Oh, and I would have liked to have come back at a time with more pleasing light. Maybe next time. Pick two. When I arrived at this pier, there was a young couple posted up beneath. They were alternately shooting selfies and making out. The fellow would occasionally flex a bit for good measure. This focal length made it easy to fill the frame, and I appreciated the sharpness. I'd say that's part of the character of this rig. If I took my time, my focus hit rate was good, and when I hit, it was sharp. This one demonstrated the dynamic range challenges of the sensor, though. If I bumped the shadows too much, it was unpleasantly noisy in color, which is why I made it a black and white. Pick three. The beach at Pawleys Island, south of Myrtle. Awesome spot, but get there at the right time because there are only about 20 spots in the beach parking lot. I got one and was rewarded with this shot, which I caught maybe 2 minutes late. If I was a little earlier to this composition, there was a bit of golden hour light on the grass and the dune. The trade-off is the color in the sky. And for those of you wondering, I did try to bump the shadows in the bottom third a bit more, but it got noisy fast, and I wanted to keep this one in color. Remember that I said I used ISO 400? Here I would have liked to bump down to base ISO, but I'm not sure I could have handheld it if I did. Pick 4. One of the criticisms I have of my photography is that I could do a much better job telling stories with my images. This one has a bit more of a story, but there's just that little bit missing. For example, if my father was walking toward rather than away, and if he was eating an ice cream cone, and if I could somehow hit said cone with my Dennis the Menace slingshot so he'd spill it, alternately I could have just waited in this spot for something more interesting to happen. What I like is that the image communicates the dynamic feel of that section of the Myrtle Beach boardwalk. This, however, is the only time I wish I had the A7 III for the live view. I missed the exposure on the sign and ran into the same dynamic range challenge with the shadows. Live and learn, I hear some folks say. Pick 5. Okay, confession time. On the second to last day of the trip, I found a Canon 70-200 f2.8L for $600 in a used gear shop. So I grabbed it, and this was the first pick on my first outing. The combination of full-frame sensor and 200mm compression at an aperture of 2.8? Yes, please. I'm only including this one shot, plus the one of my father from the beginning of the video, because I'd like to do a dedicated video for this combo. I have a sense that it'll be a fun one if I don't sprain something hauling this beast around. Overall, this was a great learning experience, and I could absolutely see myself using the same rig for future vacations. The 5D Classic is dead simple in manual mode. I never felt like I was fighting the camera, and most of the time I had plenty of hits with focus and generally usable exposures. If that's not like a Leica, I don't know what to say. No, really, I don't know what to say. I mean, I hope it's like a Leica, but I really have no earthly idea. Nurse? For the love of all things holy, please click the subscribe button so the YouTube gatekeepers will pat me on the head. Oh, and the question of the day for the comment section is, if you could only bring one body and one prime lens on a week-long trip, what would you choose? Thanks for watching and have a great day.